Hey, what's going on, guys? So I'm back with a book review. This book comes from author Carl Weber. I really love Carl Weber because he has very juicy books. And this book here is a part of a 3-book series. The name of this book is called Something on the Side, and it surrounds a group of girls who are a part of a book club. And it's just not your typical book club. This book club, in order to enter it, you have to be considered like a plus size woman. You have to be size 10 and up to be a part of this book club. So that's a little bit juicy. The name of the book club is called BGBC, which stands for Big Girl Book Club. Now, this surrounds, like I said, some friends, and we have Tammy, and we have this girl named Coco, who is Tammy's cousin. You have these two twins named Isis and Egypt, and then you have Nikki. Now, to just jump right in, I'm going to basically just give you a rundown of each character. Now, Tammy is married to this guy named Tim, and they have two beautiful children. They've been married for 11 years, going on 12. So that's a little rundown of them. They are happy. They have an amazing life. They're financially stable. They have an amazing sex life, and they just have just that ideal, healthy, good marriage. So that's a little rundown of them. Now, Coco, who is Tammy's cousin, she is a hoe. I'm sorry, but she is very out there when it comes to going after what she wants. She's just sleeping from guy to guy to guy to guy, just jumping in and out of the bed. She's a woman who knows what she wants. She's very sexually experienced because she has a lot of men in her life. So she's getting plenty of practice. She knows what she's working with. She's a very good looking woman, and she knows how to use her goods to get what she wants. And that's a little rundown of her. And then I'm going to get to the guys that she becomes involved with. She's going to meet this guy named Jackson, who is a married man, but he has a lot of money. And then she's going to meet this guy named Mac, who she feels like is not as financially stable as Jackson and can't provide her with the lifestyle that Jackson can. But she falls in love with this man named Mac. So that's a little rundown of Coco. Then you have Nikki, who she has a son, and she comes from a very dysfunctional type of relationship. She was with her baby father, who was very abusive, kind of tore down or run down her self-esteem. So she was just abused. She got out of that relationship, and then she goes on to meet her lover, who is a stud named Tiny. Yeah, she's in a lesbian relationship right now, but she's going to meet someone else at her job named Keith. So that's a little rundown of her. And then we have the two twins, Isis and Egypt. Now, Egypt, she's a very picky woman, and she's actually best friends with Tammy. They were best friends since the 3rd grade. They have a very wonderful relationship, but she's very picky. She doesn't really have a man right now. She's just looking for this all around perfect guy. He has to match everything on her list, which is kind of high. So she has a certain particular type of man that she's looking for. He's got to make 6 figures. He has to be well endowed. He has to be good looking, and a list goes on and on. So right now, currently, she doesn't have anyone. And then you have her sister Isis, who is currently involved with someone, and she thinks that their relationship is A1. But we'll get into the guy that she's seeing. Well, his name is Tony. And then we have somebody that she used to be in love with before Tony named Rashad. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. So we're going to start where the book starts out first, and that's with Tammy. And Tammy is just riding home, and she's pulling up to her house, and she's just thinking about her life and how in love she is and how much she loves her life. She loves her marriage. She loves her husband. She loves everything that they worked hard to attain or acquire. Her husband actually has this business, is very lucrative, it's doing great, and they are doing well financially. And she actually works with her husband. But, which when normally when you work with your spouse or whatever, there seems to be, you kind of clash because not only are you at the workplace seeing each other, you go home and you have to see each other. But I mean, surprisingly, it has worked for them. So they're happy. They have their dream home. They're just doing great. And so she goes in, and on this particular day, it's time for the girls to get together for the book club. So normally when they get together on the book club, of course, they prepare some food and just get all their refreshments ready for wherever they have their meeting. And it just so happens their book club meeting tonight is going to be at Tammy's place. And so she's trying to prepare. And normally when it's book club night, her husband, Tim, goes to hang out at the bar and just, hang around there until her book club is finished or whatever. So she goes in and she's just happy and she knows her little routine. When it's book club time, she knows exactly what to do before her husband leaves. She's a type of woman or wife that feels like, although I appreciate my husband giving me space when I have my little book club meeting, I always like him to remember before he goes out there what he has at home. So she decides to give her husband a little special attention with some fellatio before, he heads out, because that's what he absolutely loves. And she knows how to just make him orgasm at a drop of a hat because she's so good at what she does. And she knows once she does that, he'll be on his merry way. She does that and he's gone, and in walks the girls or whatever, and they're coming in, and they're just there and they're talking about, the book or whatever. Now, Tammy cannot stand Coco. I think Tammy is a little bit jealous of Coco because Coco is a very good looking woman, and she always manages to have the finer things in life, always have a man. But what Tammy had up on her is that Tammy had a husband, and Coco never had a husband, never really had a serious relationship. So she kind of flaunts that around. But I think she's a little bit jealous of how Coco looks and how sexy and appealing she is. She has the perfect body and just the good looks and all of that. So she's just slightly jealous of her. And so she just loves to throw up in her face, her perfect little marriage life. So of course, when she sees her cousin come in, they just kind of like don't really mess with each other. And so, of course, Nikki and Tiny comes in. Now, she brings her girlfriend to the book club. I guess her girlfriend heard her talk about the books that they were reading, that she decided that I need to just be a part of this book club. So she's there, and then Isis in Egypt. Now, the book that they were reading, it was so juicy that all of them was getting hot and bothered. They're just talking about the book, having a great old time. And so, of course, the book got Tammy to start thinking about something that she wanted to do for her husband, because her husband is about to turn 40 on his birthday. So this book really got her juices flowing, and it got her to thinking about this idea that she wanted to present to her husband or whatever. And so after the book club is over and after they discuss the juicy book, her husband comes home and she said, honey, your birthday is about to come up and I want to do something amazing for you. I want to fulfill your every need. Now, mind you, they have no problems in the bedroom. Like, they do everything and then some together. Like, their sex life is bomb.com. Like, there are no complaints. They get it on on a regular basis. They never not have sex. They're always having sex. You would think after 11 years that that will die down, but no, like their sex life is A1. They even watch porn and stuff together. They just have fun sexually. And she just feels like, I know he desires me, but I want to be his every desire. So she asks him, she was like, honey, what is something that you always wanted? Like, what is your deepest fantasy? And of course, he was telling her things that he was thinking about with her and him. And that's not what she wanted to hear. Although that was nice, she said, no, come on now. The ground is safe. You can tell me, what have you always desired? And he really couldn't think of anything. And, he was like, well, that I always wanted, like, it would be nice to have a threesome. And she was like, okay. So she was like, think of any woman that comes into your mind. And he couldn't really think of anybody. And so she was like, well, what about any one of my friends, like anybody that I'm close to? Would there be anybody that you could see us being in a bedroom with? Anybody. You could pick anybody. I don't care who it is. Anybody that I'm close to. And so he says, okay, well, your cousin Coco. Now, immediately she was pissed off because she cannot stand Coco. And she kind of went off. And she was like, out of all people, you're going to say Coco? Like, she's a hoe. And he was like, well, you asked me, so I was honest with you. And he was like, you know what? I knew that this was a trick question. You should have never even asked me. And she was pretty pissed. She didn't handle that too well. So I'm like, if she can't even handle that, what makes her think she's going to be able to handle her husband having a threesome with her? So she tried to pretend like, she was calmed down a little bit. She was like, okay, let me calm down because after all, I did ask him the question. So let me just, okay, breathe, take a breather. And he was like, well, I mean, if not her, like, okay, who would you like to be in the bedroom with or with us? And she was like, well, I was thinking more so Egypt. And he was like, well, why you say Egypt? And she was like, well, she's not a hoe and she's a little bit more like me. She's my best friend and she is someone that I could really trust. And he was like, well, I mean, and actually, I believe there's a little history with Tammy's husband, Tim, and Egypt. I think before Tammy and Tim hooked up, Egypt, he was trying to date Egypt, but of course, at that particular time, I think this was back when they were in college. Tammy and Egypt were in college. He wanted to date her, but she kind of turned him down. And so that's how Tammy and Tim hooked up. So I don't know. This is just a sticky situation right here. So anyways, he was like, well, yeah, I mean, that'll never happen. But you just saying as far as like fantasy wise, then yeah, Egypt will be perfect. And she was like, well, what if it's just not a fantasy? What if it's something that I want to make become a reality in real life? And he's just looking at her like, what, are you crazy? And she was like, I'm serious. And so to get him to start thinking about it, she started like seducing him and trying to get him to be okay with that idea and just letting him know that she's pretty serious about it, but he didn't really want to hear about it. So she said, okay, well, maybe this is not a good time to kind of pressure him or seduce him with the idea. She said, I'm gonna slow walk him down. And so that's pretty much that. So now it gets into Coco. Now, Coco, she is just laying there. And mind you, she does not have a job. Her job is to look good and to find her next suitor to pay for her rent. So basically, she's like a prostitute, just not on the streets or broke or poor. So this is how she gets by. She gets by on her looks, and she gets by screwing men very well, because she basically has men wrapped around her finger. Like anybody that she hits up to call, that she want to sleep with that day, they're there. I mean, they drop everything that they're doing to come see her. Now, mind you, most of the men, it's just a coincidence, I think, but most of the men that she interacts with, or that's her suitor, they're married or they have a girlfriend. So it's like, dang, girl. But the reason why this chick is the way that she is because we all know that sob, sad story where the girl falls in love and then she gets her heart broken, and you know how that goes. So this is where she is. She was in love at one point. She thought the world of this man, wanted to marry this man, was faithful to this man, never believed in cheating or stepping out. But he hurt her. So she vowed to herself that she was never going to be that stupid again, nor vulnerable again. So this is where she is. She has no respect for men. She is almost like a man eater. Like she's able to separate her heart, her emotions, her feelings from just having sex and having a good time and getting paid for it, and knowing how to not get too attached. But these men, honey, they are on her like white on rice. So she's living in a nice apartment. Her rent is due, and everything like that. So she's like, okay, my rent is due. And she really does not feel like sleeping with her landlord, because he's married, and then she's not really attracted to him, but every now and then she would give him a little piece. You know, she would give him some just to get by when she was short on the rent, or going to be late on the rent, or didn't have the rent. You know, she would always give him some and he would let her slide. And so I guess she feels like, I don't want to sleep with him today, and I don't want to be bothered with him today, and she don't want to make it a habit of sleeping with him, because that can just be a messy situation, because you know, this is her place, you know, where she lives, and she is supposed to be your sanctuary. She didn't want no problems like that. So she gets ready, and she's making sure, you know, she's wearing tight, revealing clothes, that her breasts are pushed up to the nines. Her girls are spewing out of her outfit, and she knows she's looking good. So it's just easy for her to snag men. And so, anyways, she was walking down the street, I believe, to go to this restaurant. And when she's up in there, she happens to see a great suitor. Now, the suitor that she spots, she didn't know that he was a powerful man. He looked the part, you know, he had a nice suit on, and she could tell that he had some money. And so, and I think she did kind of recognize him. She was like, I know that's not the owner of all these luxury condos. Like, he owned a lot of properties around town, and she was thinking in her mind, this must be him. But then again, she didn't really know. But anyways, he took a liking to what he saw, and he introduces himself, and they're just talking, and they're having some lunch or whatever. And she was just basically trying to not waste time with him, and letting him know that, hey, I'm interested in you. I know you're interested in me. And he kind of told her from the gate that, no, I don't think he told her that he was married. I don't know. But anyways, he decided that he wanted to bite the bait and go back to his place. And they go back to his place, and she's trying to, you know, make him understand that this is not going to be for free. You know, you got to pay to play. And he's willing to give her some cash. He gave her, well, not just yet, but they get to the place and they're kissing or whatever, go all through his place. And she was like, he has a nice place. It's very nice. And they're about to do the do or whatnot. And then you hear some keys at the front door. And so she was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? He was like, that's my wife. Hide in the closet. And so she was like, oh no, you're gonna have to do something. Like, you didn't tell me you was married. And he was like, no, just go in the closet. So she had to go in the closet. And while she was in the closet, she was peeking out the window and she was just looking at his body and looking at his wife's body. I think he was like in his 60s, if I'm not mistaken. And she was like, ugh, like his body don't look like much, because the suit kind of fooled her. She was thinking that at least he was going to be working with something up under his suit. His body was whack. And then his penis was not even all that big. And she was like, oh, thank God. Like, his wife came and was able to get him off, because she was not turned on at all. So anyway, she's in the closet and she had to watch these elderly couples like have sex. And she was like, what was I thinking? But she was like, he got a nice crib, he got money or whatever. And so they get done. The wife finally orgasms or whatnot. And she was like, well, I'm going to freshen up. And she goes in to take a shower. And so, of course, Coco comes out and he was like, okay, well, here's your stuff. You got to go. She was like, I don't think so. Like, I need some money. You're going to give me some money. And he was like, you need to leave. And she said, I'm not leaving. And if your wife find out that I'm here, all heck is going to break loose. You better give me some money. And so he threw her some money. And, she looked at the wad that he gave her. It had to be like 3,000. I don't know. And she was like, dang, wow, I'm happy about this. There's no complaints. So she gets her stuff and she was able to get out of there without leaving a trace that she was ever there. And so, and that's where that ends. And then it gets to Nikki. Now, with Nikki, like I said, she has a baby father. She has a son, but he was very abusive. Like, I think her baby dad was very jealous of her because she was a nice looking woman. And in order for a way for a man to feel like he can control her or bring her down, of course, you become verbally abusive. And then you go from being verbally abusive to physically abusive. And that's what happened. He really tore her self-esteem down, made her make sure that she would eat all types of food so that she can get bigger and bigger, where no one would want her. And then he would always accuse her of cheating because she was cute. She was an attractive, gorgeous girl. So the abuse was just so horrible, to the point where she said, you know what, that's it. I'm not taking this no more. I'm leaving this relationship. Now, of course, he was like, where you think you're going to go? You ain't got nowhere to go. You ain't got nothing. And she didn't care. So her and her son, they ended up staying at a shelter. And this is where she met Tiny. Tiny was working there, and she always made sure that her and her son had, a bed and just food, and just treating her extra special, being extra nice. And so they took a liking to each other, and Tiny actually helped her get a place. And of course, they became an item. And she never thought that she would be in a lesbian relationship, but she was in a lesbian relationship. Now, mind you, her girlfriend is kind of like a stud type, like, boyish type. So, it was like going with the man, but not so much, because, they wear their strap-ons and different things like that. So it was kind of a different experience, but she actually fell for her girlfriend, Tiny. They were in love, and it wasn't a phase, because I think they were in a relationship for 10 years. So yeah, she kind of like loved her because she saved her from herself. She saved her, and she made her feel better about herself. She made her feel good, and she really appreciated Tiny for that. And the sex wasn't too bad or whatnot. Yeah, she liked it. And so, and Tiny was good to her. They did everything together. Tiny would cook for her. They would have dinner, watch movies together, and just be a nice little family or whatever. But they kind of was having some problems because Tiny, her girlfriend, was a little bit clingy, didn't want her doing anything if she would stay out too late. She was always like checking for her, like wondering where she was, what she was doing. So it kind of was, I don't know, kind of a toxic type of situation. Now, she didn't like that too much. So at work, at Nikki's job, there was a new guy that came in. Now, immediately when she saw this new guy named Keith started working there, like, of course, everybody and their mama was judging Keith because he looked like a thug. He had braids and, he was kind of sagging his clothes. But she could see, she tried not to judge a book by its cover, but she knew right off the gate that she was attracted to Keith. And if she didn't know any better, Keith seemed like he was immediately attracted to her when they got introduced or whatever. And so she knew she liked him when she would hear her coworkers saying, "Oh, look at that thug. He probably got a background or whatever coming up in here with his pants sagging. He just looks like a thug." And Nikki didn't appreciate that. She was like, you don't want to just try to be judgmental and laugh at people or judge people. You might not want to do that. So I knew then that she was going to end up liking this guy. And she was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm supposed to like my woman, but here I am trying to defend this guy or whatnot. And so that's that with that. So you already know what's getting ready to happen with that. And so with Isis, now Isis, like I said, she's a twin. Her twin sister is Egypt. Now with Isis, before she met Tony, now she has this man in her life and she's been with Tony, I think, for 5 years. They've been together, but she wants something serious because she didn't want a repeat of her previous relationship with this guy named Rashad. Now Rashad is currently, he had went to jail, but when they were in a relationship, she couldn't get him to commit. Like, she wanted something more, but Rashad, I guess he never did because he never hinted around to marriage or anything like that. He was a thug and everything like that. He had to go to jail. And so when he got locked up, of course you have to move on with your life. And she meets Tony. Now, like I said, they've been seeing each other it's been 5 years, and Tony is playing games with Isis because, like, you don't need to be with someone for 5 years before you know whether or not you want to settle down. But he keeps leading her on, making her think that, oh, we're going to get married, because she will always ask him, I need to know where this relationship is going, because that's why I'm not giving you a key to my place, because I don't want you, like, why buy the milk or the cow when you can get it for free, So she's like, that's why she never gives him a key. And she was like asking him, like, where is this going? And he would always say something like, we're going to do it one day, I'm just trying to take my time. I don't want to be hurt. Just giving her all types of excuses. And then he always would put it on her really good to get her to, manage or get by, just enough to get by, just enough to keep stringing her along. So she's just caught up in just all this great sex, but she's just wondering, like, why won't he go ahead and make a commitment and marry me? And also what he does when she does bring it up, he'll do something nice, like make sure he brings flowers and cook her an amazing dinner and run her bubble bath and just do things out the way and just making her feel like, I'm doing all of this because you're getting a preview to what, is to come. I promise I'm going to be the best man for you, and blase, and all this and that. And Tony is just the typical no good rat. So I'm going to just say that. So, of course, with Egypt, she don't have no one. So, I think, of course, Tammy, like I said, she wants to have a threesome, and she always did have Egypt in mind because Egypt is her best friend. She trusts her best friend, and she know that nothing will go down. She didn't want to just do it with anyone that she didn't know because, she just want to do it with someone she could trust, even though it probably would be safer to do it with someone, of course, that you don't know. That way you'll never see that person again. But she didn't want to do that because she feels like it's irresponsible. It's just nasty. You don't know what people got. And she know her friend Egypt don't have anything. She knew that she could trust Egypt, and she knew that, that's who she wanted. And so, of course, she presented this idea to her husband. So she's still working on that. And of course, she's still presenting this idea to her husband, Tim. And she brought it up again. And he was like, man, you must be really serious about this. And she said, I am. And so one day or one evening when they were being intimate, she started giving him fellatio, but she was like, now I want you to think about me and Egypt taking turns doing this to you. Wouldn't you enjoy that? And she was like trying to seduce him and get him to think about it. And so after she kept presenting this idea and it was getting closer and closer to his birthday, he said, why do you want to do this? And she said, like I said, it's your birthday's coming up. You're going to be 40. I want to give you something in this way that you've never had because I want to be your everything. I want to just fulfill all of your sexual needs. I mean, I know that we have a great sex life, but I want to do something big for you for your 40th birthday. I want to give you something that you've never had, and I want to share that experience with you. That's why I want to do it, because I love you, and I think that this is something that we would need to spice it up even more. And he said, well, because he didn't want to do it. Tim did not want to bring anyone into their relationship whatsoever. He didn't feel like they needed that. He didn't even want that. He wasn't even thinking about that. But his wife seems to be serious. She seems so adamant about it. So he was like, okay, let's do it. I'm with it. And she was like, are you serious? He was like, yeah, I'll go ahead and comply. I'm with it. And she was like, okay, well, I'm going to talk to Egypt about it. Now that she had her husband on board, her next move was to get Egypt. And so, now she kind of she said, now I know I gotta do this, get her little drinks in her before I present this to her. And so, of course, they're talking and they're laughing one day. And she just says, what do you think about, Tim's birthday is coming up? And she was like, yeah. What are you guys gonna do? And she was like, what if I've been thinking about doing something crazy for him? And she was like, how crazy? And she was like, well, I'm thinking about giving Tim a threesome. She was like, oh, okay, that'd be cool. Where y'all gonna go to go meet, the person? She was like, I don't really want to have just anybody in this threesome. I was just thinking how you felt about having a threesome with me and Tim. And of course, Egypt was like, girl, are you crazy? And she was like, what? I trust you. You're my best friend. I wouldn't want just any and everybody in our bedroom. I think that, you would be great. And she was like, girl, I'm not doing that. I'm not sleeping with you and Tim. Are you crazy, girl? Get out of here. And of course, like Tammy is a little embarrassed, but Egypt wasn't really trying to hear that. And she was like, dang, I'm kind of embarrassed now, but okay, I'm going to leave it alone. I don't want to pressure it too much. I don't want to pressure her. So some time go on and she keep presenting this again. And Egypt is like, girl, you are crazy. I just can't. But Tammy can tell that her best friend is kind of like she's wearing her down a little bit about the idea. But Egypt is so shocked by this that she goes and tell her sister Isis. She was like, girl, I got something to tell you. And Isis is like, what, girl? And she was like, girl, what about, you're not gonna believe this. And Isis was like, girl, if you don't tell me what you're talking about, what's going on, she was like, what about Tammy wants me to have a threesome with her and Tim? And Isis was like, are you crazy? Are you serious? And Egypt was like, yeah, I'm serious. I can't believe it. And Isis was like, well, what did you say? And Egypt was like, of course I told her no. She was like, okay, good. So why are you bringing this to me? She was like, I'm just telling you, like, it's just crazy or whatever. And so, anyways, Tammy said, okay, I'm going to keep on presenting this to her and maybe she'll break. So this time when she called Egypt to come over to her house, she made sure she gave her her favorite drink and she gave her like just enough drinks to have her tipsy, but she didn't want her drunk because she wanted her to be relaxed but not too drunk to the point where she wasn't really remembering or she's just too inebriated to know what she's consenting to. So she said, well, I'm gonna have to turn it up a notch. I want to get her a little bit tipsy so she's feeling good, and I'm willing to throw some extra bonuses in there with cash. And so she said, I know that will get to her. I know how much, Egypt, she likes cash. And I know she been eyeing this car that she always been wanting. So I'm going to present some cash to her too. So they're sitting down drinking and she's getting tipsy or whatever. And then that's when Tammy goes in and said, well, have you given any thought to my idea about giving Tim a threesome or having a threesome with us? His birthday is about to come up and all of that. And this time Egypt was like, you serious, right? And she was like, yeah. And Egypt was like, well, what's in it for me? And she said, well, I'm willing to pay you $4,000. And she was like, $4,000? And she was like, yeah, $4,000. And of course, when Egypt heard how much he was going to give her, now that got to her. She was like, you would do all of that just for me to have a threesome with y'all? And she was like, yeah. And not only that, on the day, I'll make sure that we'll get a hotel room and we can go to the spa, get pedicures and manicures to just have fun and loosen up before, the evening. And trust me, I'm going to pay for everything. Plus give you the $4,000. And so Egypt, she couldn't turn that down. She was like, well, this is weird, but $4,000? I can put that down on the car I always wanted, and we're gonna go to the spa and eat, and you're gonna pay for the hotel and all that stuff. She was like, well, I'm gonna agree, but you're gonna have to give me half of the money up front. And so Tammy was happy. She was like, of course. So she wrote her a check for the money up front, half of the money up front, and then the rest after they get done. And she was so elated. She was like, yes, okay. She said, so this is what we gonna do. I'm gonna set it up for Friday evening. We're gonna go to this hotel. I'm gonna pick you up, and then we're gonna go shopping, get our nails done, like I said, go to the spa. Then we're gonna go back to the hotel room, and I'm gonna make sure, the atmosphere and everything like that is right. So we gonna do this. You're consenting to this, right? And she was like, yeah. So, honey, it comes down to the time for them to have the threesome. And of course, as promised, Tammy takes Egypt and they go shopping and they get their nails and toes done, get massages for the day. They're just out having a wonderful time, eating some food or whatever. And then, they're getting a little nervous about the evening. It gets close to the evening. They go back to the hotel. And of course, Tim is waiting there. And they go in, and you could just feel the tension. And it was just kind of awkward because Tammy and her best friend was about to, they had to interact with each other in order to include themselves with Tim. It just was so awkward. So, of course, Tammy was like, well, I brought something to kind of lighten the mood. So she pulls out some weed. And Tim was like, that's what I'm talking about. So they're sitting around smoking some weed. And of course, after smoking that, they smoke another one and another joint. And then they relax. They feeling themselves. It was like, okay, we about to do this. And so Tammy was like, come on, girl, let's go and, take a bath or whatever, get a little more comfortable and step into something a little bit more sexy or whatever. So they're going to the bathroom, and they're bathing and making sure they're freshening up or whatever. And Tim is out there just chilling while they doing that. And Egypt kind of seductively just, lather some lotion on Tammy. And Tammy was surprised at how her body was responding to the way that Egypt was like lathering the lotion on her. And then she lathered some on Egypt, and Egypt was feeling a certain type of way. Her body was reacting to Tammy's touch. And so I think they started kissing, and that's when Tim came in. He was like, oh, don't start without me. And so he started sitting in the middle of them or whatnot. And he was like, so we really gonna do this? And they was like, yeah. And so Egypt began to touch Tim, and then Tammy was touching him, and they started being intimate. Now, Tammy, and see, this is why she should have never done this from the gate. Now, when Egypt and Tim were screwing or whatever, she never knew how big Tim was. Tim is hung like a horse. You hear me? He's hung. And so, when he was inside of her, screwing her and doing all of that, Tammy was sitting back like, dang, it's like he enjoying her a little bit too much. And how she was screaming, her friend Egypt was screaming, talking about, oh, you're so big, you're so big. And he was just screwing the heck out of her. He was screwing the heck out of her. And Tammy was just so mad. Like, because when it was her turn, and she felt like he wasn't screwing her as adamantly as he was screwing Egypt. And she felt like it was mediocre when it came to her. And so at this point, she's feeling a certain type of way inside. Like she's kind of angry. But she doesn't say anything. She just keep going until they finish or whatnot. And the escapade is over. And it's a done deal. She leaves, they all leave or whatever. But now there's trouble in paradise. Now, although Tim enjoyed it and he had a good time, that was it for him. Like, he didn't think anymore about it after that night. Like I said, they went home and he left that there. What happened that night, he left there. But Tammy could not get that out of her mind, the way that he was screwing her, looking at her. And it just seemed like he was all into it to Tammy, that she kind of bottled that up inside. They didn't even talk about it. They didn't talk about anything, like, which is strange. It seemed like somebody should have just brought up, like, well, how did you like it or whatever. They never talked about it. And this went on for a week. And she's just fuming mad inside. And Tammy became paranoid. Like, she can tell that there was kind of like, it was awkward between them ever since the threesome. And I think mainly because in her mind, she was going through these different set of emotions and jealousy and insecurities in her mind, that she just made it awkward. But Tim, he really loves his wife. He wasn't even fantasizing about Egypt. He didn't think nothing about Egypt. He was just doing that to please his wife. he was just doing what she suggested. But Tammy was thinking that Egypt was calling her husband secretly because she was trying to call Egypt, but Egypt has been distant. She's been kind of busy or whatever. And her husband was acting different. So she was like, they must be seeing each other. They must be getting together. So now she's angry at her best friend. And her best friend does not have any clue as to what's going on. Because when they go to the book club meetings, she just was copping the attitude because Egypt kind of was missing in action, and she wasn't coming to the book clubs, and she was thinking the times that Egypt was not coming to the book clubs that she was off with her husband. It just was a mess until finally Tammy just blew up and she started accusing her husband of messing around with Egypt. And her husband just went down through there. That poor guy, like he didn't even want the threesome to begin with. But here he was complying to what his wife suggested, and now he's catching flack from it. I just felt so sorry for Tim. And he was trying to assure her, like, I love you. I will never cheat on you. I will never do anything behind your back. Like, baby, trust me. You got to stop this. There's nothing going on. I did this for you. But in her head, she just had this rage and this jealousy. She just felt like they were seeing each other behind her back. She would just get so paranoid, and she would try to call Tim, and she would accuse him of hanging up on her or turning off his phone because he was sleeping with Egypt. And he said, my phone died. He had to explain to her the reason why I didn't answer is because my phone was not on me. So I left it at home to let it charge. And sure enough, it was there like he said. And she's just looking stupid. And he was like, I love you, baby. I love you. Don't do this. We have a good thing going. Don't do this. And so it got so bad to where she just kept exploding. And then Egypt finally found out that why Tammy was acting different with her. And she just came out and said, she said, are you sleeping with Tim? Are you seeing Tim? And she was like, I can't believe that you would even say that to me when this was your idea. But she was like, no, I would never sleep with Tim. And of course, Tim came in when Tammy and Egypt were arguing, and Egypt said, you need to get your wife because she's trying to accuse us of sleeping with each other. So of course she leave, and he just had it up to here with her accusing him. And he says, because at this point her husband's desperate because he loves her. He said, I'll tell you what, baby, would it make you feel better, or will you feel better if I let you have a night with a man of your choice? That way you can get out of your head that I'm not cheating on you, or you'll feel as if this is even. I'm going to let you have your night with somebody. And I know that there's this guy that I work with that worked with us named this Spanish guy, this Latin guy. I think his name is Raul, or however you pronounce that name, but I'm just gonna call him Latin Lover. He was like, I know that you're attracted to him, and which she is. Tammy is attracted to that Latin guy that works up there at their job. And he said, well, I'm gonna talk to him. He said, no, actually, he said, yeah, I'm gonna talk to him about it, or he already talked to him about it because of how crazy she been acting. So he already had presented that idea to the guy at work, but he was going to talk to his wife about it just to kind of repair their marriage and make it smooth over. So that way they both don't have any, they have something to hang over both of their heads. It's just not him having a threesome. He'll let her have her moment so that they both can just start over. He was desperate. And so she was like, sleep with that guy at work. And inside she was like, well, do you really think that that will fix or repair the marriage? And he was like, yeah, I really do. And I know you're attracted to him, which she is. And she says, well, I mean, if you think that's going to help, I'm not going to protest. And besides, she was attracted to him, and she was like, well, yeah, that's a good way for us to get even and for this to smooth over. And so, like he told her, he said, I already talked to him about it. He's okay with it. And I told him that I was going to speak to you about it. So now that you're with it, I'll tell him when and where. And so, honey, he sets up for them to meet at a hotel. Or no, screw at the house. I don't know. But honey, she got a piece of that Latin lover, okay? And he put it on her so good that she could not believe what she'd been missing out on. Now, even though she has an amazing sex life with her husband, Tim, he doesn't go down on her. But this Latin dude, he was, the way he was going down on her, she would come 4 times in one setting. She never knew that multiple orgasms existed until he gave her fellatio. Okay. He was doing that so well. She got addicted. Like after, and he could screw too, but he really could eat better than what he can screw. But his screwing wasn't bad as well, but he just knew what he was doing. Now, mind you, this Latin dude, he's married as well. Okay. He's married too. So, which I'm shocked that he even agreed to that, because now you're sleeping on your wife. It's just crazy. And so, after that day, after they did it, it's a problem because now Tammy cannot get that Latin dude out of her mind, out of her head. And when she goes to work, she's just looking at him like, wow, like, I wonder, is he fantasizing about what we did? Instead of this girl just leaving it alone, like Tim left it alone after their threesome, she didn't leave it alone. She actually was so hot and bothered and enjoyed it so much she wanted seconds. So what she does is present to the Latin dude while they be at work. And because like they work, their offices are close by. And so she would just be staring at him. And, the Latin dude didn't really think nothing of it. So anyway, she was like, I'm just going to see where his mind is at. And she called him and he was like, what's up? And she was looking at him while she was on the phone in her office, looking at him in his office. And they were kind of looking at each other while they were on the phone. She was like, did you enjoy when we slept together? And he was like, are you really doing this right now? Your husband works where we work. We cannot be on the phone like this. Are you crazy? And she was like, just answer my question. Did you enjoy it? Do you want some more? He was kind of shocked, but he was like, yeah, I enjoyed it. And I do want some more. Honey, they meet up again and again and again and again. This woman is addicted to him. And I'm just so pissed off because it's like, how are you going to suggest a threesome, then get mad, then be in a jealous rage, accusing your husband Tim of cheating, which he wasn't, but then you turn around. He gives you the opportunity. You're going to get a hall pass or a free pass, whatever they call it. You go ahead and sleep with him and you keep doing it. You are actually doing what you accused your husband of. This one, I was so mad at her. She could not stop. And she kept sleeping with him. She kept meeting up with him, kept doing it and doing it and doing it to the point where she wasn't even attracted to her husband. Her husband was trying to be intimate with her and she just gave him the cold shoulder, saying how she got a headache or she's tired or she's on her period. It got to a point where she couldn't even stand the sight of her own husband. Somebody that she actually loved and enjoyed having sex with. And yet here you are denying your husband of sex, just refusing him, can't stand the sight of him. You don't even get turned on by him like you used to. All you wanted was this Latin lover. That's all she wanted. And it got so bad. She just kept turning down her husband. And so she just became reckless. and to the point where she slipped up, because on their car there is a tracker on the car. And I don't think she remembered that her husband had put a tracker on both of their cars just in case like something happens. So this one particular evening, while she was out with because they would meet up at this rinky dink motel, that way no one would ever find out that they would be there, because that's the least likely place that anyone would suspect that they would sleep there. So anyway, she laid up with this fool, and it got late, like they was screwing and screwing, and then she decided to take a nap. When she woke up, it was late. She forgot to pick up her kids from school. It at that point, she hit rock bottom. She hit rock bottom. Like, and then she got up. She was like, oh my God, it's late. I forgot to pick up my kids. I got to get out of here. She goes outside. Her car wasn't out there. She was like, oh my God, I got robbed. My car is not out here. What am I going to do? How am I going to get home? How am I going to explain this to my husband? And so she said, I gotta act like the car, like I was robbed or hijacked for the car. And so she said, that's what I would tell him. And then you came to pick me up or whatever. And he said, that's not going to be believable. Look at you. We got to make it look like you were carjacked. So he put some dirt on her, make her look like, she was hijacked or carjacked, whatever you call it. And so he drove her home, and of course he let her out like so she could walk the rest of the way. And when she's walking up to the house, she could see that the car in fact is in the driveway. And she was like, wait a minute, well, maybe they got the car. The police officers found the person who stole the car and just brought the car here. So she's like, okay. She didn't know what was going on, so she goes in, and her husband is just sitting there. And she comes in, she was like, oh, baby, somebody stole the car, but I'm glad it made it back. I was hijacked. He was like, be quiet. She was like, no, you gotta believe me. You gotta believe me. I was carjacked and all this and that. He was like, you lying. I picked up the car. Did you forget that we had a tracker on the car? And at this point, she's busted. He said, and I know that you've been sleeping with him still, because I saw his car out there too, and you're up in that motel. It didn't take a rocket scientist for me to figure out what was going on. This is why you have been denying me. This is why you have been refusing me. And he was like, get out. Get out. And there's nothing that she could do. So of course he had her stuff and she had to get up out the house. And I couldn't believe that she jeopardized 12 years of marriage over a piece of booty. Over nothing. Because, oh, this guy can eat really well and my husband don't like to go down on me, so I just wanted to continue this. That was very irresponsible and negligent of her to do that. So now she's kicked out of the house. And that's that with her. So with Coco, like I said, she is messing with this guy named Jackson. Now he has lots of money. He owns several properties in New York and different things like that. This whole location is based out of New York, if I didn't mention that. And all of these women are in their 30s. Okay, like mid 30s. And so with this guy Jackson, she's sleeping with him. So she figures like, well, I don't have to see a lot of dudes at one time. I could just narrow it down to Jackson, sleep with him because he has the most money out of all the guys that she was hopping left and right with. She figures like, okay, I could just see him, take his money. But on this one particular evening, because he wines and dines her, I mean, he gives her lots of money, lots of cash, and he just spoiling her because he know that's what she likes. And So, um, this one particular evening, he had took her to this nice African poetry spot. And when she was there, she's just enjoying everybody in the crowd or whatever. And then this poet comes up to the mic. And immediately when she saw him, she was wet in her panties. Like the way he sound, his poetry, just his whole demeanor, just this aura about him that just really gravitated to her or pulled at her. It really got her attention, and that has never really happened to her before. And she kind of had to catch herself because she had to remember she was there with Jackson, even though he's married, and that's not really her man. Men are territorial, so she just had to not really be too much in a trance out of respect for her being there with him. And so she was like, who is this nigga up here? He fine. He has a nice, sultry, deep voice, and he's speaking this poetry. She was just mesmerized. And so she said, honey, I'm going to have to find out who he is. And so Jackson had to take a phone call. I guess it was his wife. So he excused himself. And while he excused himself, she made it a point to go over there to him, and she see all these women crowding around him or different things like that. And with her always having her way with men, she thought it was just gonna be easy. She was just gonna walk on up. He noticed her, but he wasn't really fazed by her, and she thought she was about to get his number and have him wrapped around her finger. And I think she does ask him, can we exchange numbers? He was like, if you want my number, then you have to come back and see me to show me that you're serious. And she was like, like, no, he did not. No, he did not. So she said, well, shoot, I really want him. So I guess I'm going to have to be back. So Jackson comes out, they leave or whatever. And so Jackson took her to a different location. He took her to this nice luxury loft building, and he took her up there. And I guess she had no idea what he was doing, but he took her up there and he was like, you like this? And she was like, oh, do I like it? I love it. She loved how spacious it was, how modern and luxury it was, and how beautiful it was, and all of that, and the clothes and everything that was decked out in there. He said, this can be yours. And she was like, what? He was like, yeah, this can be all yours. And not only that, you'll have spending expensive. I can give you $10,000 a week. And she was like, I cannot complain about that. As well as her own personal driver. He got her own personal driver, for a fully furnished loft apartment, designer clothes and bags up in there. And he said, I'm going to give you the keys, but only under one condition. And she was like, what? He was like, well, you have to agree to see me and only me. It cannot be any suitors. I want to be the only one. And when I want something, it's mine. And I'm very territorial about it. And I don't like to share my toys. And so she was thinking in her mind, like, no, he did not think that I'm his toy and I'm going to be running at his beck and call. She didn't like that because she was kind of independent when it came to how she spends her time. She didn't like that. But how could you complain about a loft that you don't have to pay rent for, and you're going to be getting $10,000 a week and your own personal driver? So she was like, she didn't want to do it because she was interested in this Mac guy, but she went ahead and complied to that. And she was like, okay, that'll be fine. That's fine with me. Yes, I'm yours. So she takes the keys and she's just enjoying this, but she goes up to this poetry spot and she goes see Mac, and she keeps seeing him. And of course, when he gets done, he's just playing hardball with her until eventually he was like, okay, she's showing that she's interested. So I'm going to give her my number. She gets his number, they call each other, but she was still messing with Jackson and different things like that on the side. And Mac is starting to dig her a little bit more. And so of course they started hanging out, and after hanging out, they started being intimate. And honey, when they made love finally, because he had been refusing to sleep with Coco. Coco couldn't figure out why he was not sleeping with her or whatever, but she just found herself to be liking him more and more and more because he was different. He handled her a little bit different. It wasn't about sex, and it wasn't about money for once in her life. And so by the time that they became intimate, she had fell in love with him, and he had fallen in love with her, but they really didn't verbalize that. But Mac knew something was going on, that because every time they would spend time together at his place, of course, excuse me, you remember the agreement that she agreed to with Jackson, that, she had to be available 24/7, and she had to be at his beck and call. So she really couldn't spend the night at Mac's place. She had to always leave and go. And Mac knew something was going on. He was like, you know what? I want you all to myself. And I know something else is going on, but you're going to have to make up your mind what you want to do. Either you're going to be all mine or you're not. So she really had some thinking to do, but she wasn't ready to make a decision because she was like, okay, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? You know, I'm getting money. I have a nice place. And even though Mac had a nice place, she didn't really, she loved him. It wasn't about money anymore. She didn't want to use him. So she kept juggling it for as long as she could. And she ultimately had to make a decision. And she decides that, you know what, Jackson, I thought that the guy with money, she said, I thought that I would be happy and satisfied with the finer things, with the money and the cars and the drivers and all of these expensive things. But you know what? I actually care about someone now, and I can't be at your beck and call anymore. So she said, I'm done. And of course, Jackson wasn't too happy about that because he was loving that. He was loving his toy, as he would say, so to speak. And he wanted her to stay because he was enjoying having sex with her, enjoying, having control over her. Even though this Negro, this rat, is married, he wanted her to just comply. And so he just started talking down to her, saying, you'll be back. That woman like you cannot just be with someone for love. You got to have the finer things in life, and money means a lot to you, and you'll be back, and all this and that. She was like, whatever, whatever. So she leaves him alone, and she chooses Mac, and they are in love. She moves in, they have a life together, and she's so happy. Now, mind you, Tammy, she's angry at this. When they would meet up for their book club meetings, she's seeing how happy Coco is, and she was like, whose man you done snagged up now? She was like, Coco was like, nobody's. Actually, he's a nice guy, and you guys will meet him any minute because he's gonna come in, because the book club meeting was at Coco's place, well, Coco's man's place. And so yeah, that's why Tammy was like, well, whose man's place are you in, and whose man did you steal? And she was like, no, I didn't have to steal him. He's single. He was single when I met him, and of course, I'm single, and we're actually happy. We're in a relationship, we're in love, and we're happy, and we're thriving, and I'm just loving this newfound life, because she became domestic, like doing the chores and cooking the dinner and just acting like a wife and just being so happy. And Tammy was not really happy because her marriage is down in the dumps right now. She messed up her marriage, and she doesn't have that happy life anymore. So she's mad that she's actually for once happy and it's working out for her. So she's jealous, thinking like, now how is this hoe gonna end up having like a happy life and a marriage, playing a married wife, and I had a whole husband and I don't even have my marriage, but she negating or being negligent to the fact that she caused these problems. She didn't have to have these problems, but because she wanted to be selfish, have her cake and eat it too, that's why she's in the boat that she's in. And so, but of course, everybody else is happy for her. And then, you know, they just, Tammy's just hating. So, anyways, then with Nikki, what ended up happening, like I said, the new guy, Keith, is working there, and Keith was just letting Nikki know that he was very attracted to her, and he would just come on to her. And so she's trying to fight it. Nikki is trying to fight this daily. And then, of course, Nikki's girlfriend, Tiny, started taking notice that something was off and amiss in their relationship, because she would always try to be intimate with Nikki, and Nikki wasn't really feeling it. And so, I guess in a relationship, everybody does have that little feeling that something is going on, but you don't really have proof. And that's pretty much where Tiny was. She knew that something was going on. So, she started putting two and two together, and she felt threatened by Keith, because she knew that there was something there. You can always tell when your significant other likes someone, and she could tell that Nikki was liking Keith. And so Tiny was always paranoid when Nikki was around Keith, and it just became a heated situation because Tiny would come up to the job looking for Nikki, and Nikki got to the point where she didn't even want to see or talk to Tiny when Tiny would come up there, call up there for work, because she was spending time with Keith. And so things just go deeper and deeper, where actually her and Keith started hanging outside of the job and getting things to eat, but they never really took it there, not at this point. But there was chemistry there. And she was like, I'm shocked because I never thought that I would be attracted to a man anymore. And here I am, I'm supposed to be a whole lesbian out here. And I guess I'm not a lesbian after all, because I'm attracted to this man and they're hanging out or whatever. And they're just enjoying each other. And at this point, Tiny is feeling threatened, and she started verbally abusing Nikki, which was different. She started verbally abusing her, and she actually hauled out and hit her out of jealousy and insecurity. And of course, Nikki is taken aback because Tiny had never disrespected her, never verbally abused her, never became physical with her. So when she was doing this, Nikki was trying to mend their relationship, but Nikki knew in her heart that it was pretty much over, especially when Tiny hit her, and then she was verbally abusing her because she knew something was going on, and that Nikki was not really telling the truth about her true feelings. So basically, Tiny knew what was going on, but Nikki didn't have the balls to say anything. And of course, Nikki and Keith just couldn't take it anymore. They started taking things to the next level at the job. They was actually having sex at the job. Yeah, things got pretty hectic. It was just so heat. The chemistry and the passion between them was pent up, and they just started having sex every day at the job until things just got out of hand, because Tiny came up there acting a fool, got in Keith's face and said, stay away from my girl. And basically Keith was like, we friends, and you don't need to be talking to her and treating her like that. And basically, Nikki, when they were arguing, of course, when they were having sex in the office, and when Keith heard that commotion out there, he kind of tried to stall time so that he was giving Nikki a chance to sneak out of the office. But Nikki stayed in the office and watched Keith and Tiny arguing. And when she heard Tiny saying, oh, you think you like her, but you don't even know her. When I found her, she was nothing. She was bigger in her weight. She had low self-esteem, just really dogging her like he made her. And Tiny, the girlfriend, was just dogging her. Like, I'm calling the stud he because she is tomboyish, but anyway, she was dogging her and tearing her down. And when Nikki heard that, she couldn't believe that that's what she always thought of her. And at that point, she knew that she was not going to take this anymore. And that pretty much after she heard that conversation is when it went downhill. Which she ended up ending things with Tiny. And of course, Tiny was mad or whatever. Things became physical between Keith and Tiny. They actually got into a fist fight, and it just got really ugly. But thank God, Tiny eventually got the point that Nikki was no longer her girl, that she had lost her due to her insecurities and all of that stuff there. And so, Keith and Nikki became an item, so to speak, and they're seeing each other, taking things serious. And so, but the strange thing about it, whenever Nikki and Keith were intimate, she never got to see the goods. Like, he would always bend her over on the desk. And she never got a chance to feel his goods, see what he was. Well, of course, she felt what he was working with when he would just bend her over and do it like that. But there was times when she wanted to give him a blowjob, but he was like, he wasn't into that. And she couldn't figure that out. How a man would refuse to receive oral sex from his woman. She didn't get that. So she decides this night that pretty much she was gonna ask more about that after they went out to dinner. Now, when they went out to dinner, they would always go to this restaurant, which was his Aunt Gwen restaurant, and the food there was so good. They would eat there all the time, and Nikki noticed that she would lose weight, and so she figured out that, okay, with me eating this food, like, what's in it. And Keith basically let her know that, the type of food that they make, it's low in sodium and it doesn't have all the high salt and all that stuff in it, that is actually healthy eating and cooking or whatever. And so she started losing weight. She started feeling herself. She started feeling confident and independent. And she just became a whole nother person. I like the person that Nikki became when she was with Keith or whatever. And so this one particular day, upon being in the restaurant, Aunt Gwen and Keith, when they were back there, he was trying to prepare a meal. They got to arguing. And I heard Aunt Gwen tell Keith that he needed to tell Nikki the truth. And of course, Nikki, when she's hearing this, she was like, what? Wait a minute. What is she talking about? Tell her the truth. And so Keith comes out there and said, we need to go. And she was like, well, what's going on? I heard her say that you need to tell me the truth. What's going on? He was like, I'll tell you later. Let's just go. So of course they're walking in silence. And, of course, Nikki was like, well, you want to tell me what's going on? Like, what is he talking about? That, you got to tell me the truth. He said, I promise you, when the time is right, I'm going to tell you, but just not tonight. I just can't do it tonight. And so Nikki didn't want to rush anything. So she was like, okay. So, what ended up happening, this one particular night when she had Keith come over, he had a note. And I guess in the note, it was an explanation as to what his Aunt Gwen was talking about, as far as telling her the truth. It was in the note, but he handed it to her and he wanted her to read it, but she was like, no, I'm going to read it later. Just sit down. We're going to have our food and our dinner. I got some amazing food. We're going to eat this and all of that. So, they're sitting there eating, and then, the feelings are high and they go to be intimate, because she was like, I'm going to give him a blowjob whether he wants it or not. Like, I have to do this because I really want to please him in that way. And so she tries to do it, but then he said, let's just go to the bedroom. So they go into the bedroom and he turned out all the lights, and she wanted to do it with the lights on, but she couldn't figure that out. And so she wasn't complaining because he know how to hit it right. So anyways, this was the first time that they ever did it missionary. And so she was holding him and hugging him, and they're in the moment, excuse me. They're in the moment and loving it and feeling it. And then she gets to putting her hands around his waist, and she felt a belt. And she was like, what the heck is this? And of course, Keith tried to jump up and pull up his pants or whatever, but she had already turned on the light really fast. And lo and behold, Keith is not Keith. Keith had a strap on. Keith is a stud. And as soon as she saw that strap on, she said, get out. And he was like, I'm trying to explain. Let me explain. Please, 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 let me explain. Please, Nikki, don't do this. She said, get out. Get out. And of course, he left and she's pissed off. She could not believe that she was messing with a girl the whole time. That blew my mind because I really thought that she was seeing a man, but this is a whole stud. I guess it's one of those like transgender women that turned into a man. I don't know. I don't know how. I mean, some of them be looking like dudes, but come on, girl. Like, come on. You should have knew something was up when he never wanted you to see what he was working with or feel it or none of that. Come on now. She should have known. So anyways, they're angry. So with Coco, now she's doing good with Mac and all this and that. And she think that they have an amazing relationship. But like I told you, Tammy was jealous. So on this particular evening, she's not with her husband. So instead of this woman thinking about ways to get her husband back, even though he put her out, so that's telling her that he don't want her. But instead of her thinking about that, she's still sleeping with the Latin dude on the side. And so this one particular evening, while they were sleeping together, she suggested that they play some porn. He was like, okay, you can pick out the porn you want to do or whatever. So they put the tape on. And so when they played the tape, she could not believe who she saw in the porno. She actually saw Coco's man, Mac, in the porno. So she was elated. She was so happy, like, oh yes, somebody's gonna be miserable just like me, because I'm gonna make sure that I give this tape to Coco so she could see what type of man she really has. I know she thought she was living happily ever after, being a domestic girlfriend, playing the housewife and all this and that, but wait till she see this video. She don't know he's doing this. He's not perfect. So anyway, sure enough, Tammy, on one of their book club meetings, gives Coco that tape, and she was like, now she's being nice to me. She knew something was up because Tammy's never really nice to her. So anyway, she was like, I'm not gonna wait till Mac get home. I'm just gonna play whatever this is. And she pops it in and she sees Mac in the porno. So she's pissed off. So now she's like, okay, I'm getting revenge. She calls Jackson. Of course, he comes over just like she suggested. Now, this is Mac's place, mind you, because she's with him. She told Jackson to come over. He was like, so you come to your senses and you miss me, huh? And she was like, kind of, sort of. I thought I was with someone that loved me, but it was all a lie. And she said, I do want to go back to you. But before I leave up out of here, I want to teach him a lesson. So anyways, she has his porno playing and she's screwing Jackson in his place. And she knows what time he comes home and everything like that. And then on cue, when she hear him coming in, she's screwing the heck out of Jackson. And of course, Mac comes back there. He was like, what the heck is going on? And she was like, you don't know what's going on? You don't know what's going on? Look on the screen. And of course, he saw himself on the screen and he knew that with her screwing another man in his house, this was what it was all about. She's angry because he didn't tell her that he was a porno star. That's what he did for a living. So of course, he's angry. He jumped up in Jackson's face, and Jackson is getting a kick out of this because I got your girl. I got her. She wants me. She don't want you no more. So, that's feeding his ego. But Mac was trying to tell her, let me explain what's going on. I love you. And of course, Coco don't want to hear any of that. She was like, you didn't tell me. I had to find out this way. Like, how could you lie to me? Why didn't you tell me? And he was like, well, I'm trying to explain. She was like, I don't want to hear it. So she leaves there. She accepts Jackson's conditions, but this time she told him, I want to be with you, but I'm not going to be at your beck and call. Now, this time I agree to be with you, but I'm not going to be available to you as often. Now, you can see me 3 times a week, and that's it. So, of course, Jackson, he had to agree to that. He complied to that. He didn't complain about that because she still wanted to make sure that she established her freedom, that she was not going to be his toy at his beck and call. He agreed. So she's back into the luxury loft and she's driving the car. She's having all the money, but she's pissed off. So she goes over to Nikki's house. And when she went to Nikki's house, she saw that Nikki was pissed off. She was like, what's going on, Nikki? She was like, girl, I just found out that Keith is not a Keith. And she was like, oh, and I'm pissed off too because I found out my man is doing pornos for a living. And so they're drinking and just talking about woe is me. And so basically Coco was like, well, what's the big deal? I mean, you already a lesbian anyway. She said, the big deal is I thought he was a man the whole time and he lied about who he was. I don't even know what to call him. He, she, whatever. And Coco was like, that's not as bad as somebody like doing porno for a living. At least you can kind of accept it because you were in a whole relationship with a lesbian, but I've never been in a relationship with a prostitute. And so Nikki was kind of like, I mean, but you do the same thing. You sleep with men for money. And of course that got her to thinking. She was like, just hear him out and see what he says, why he did it and all this and that. But, Coco was too drunk. So she crashed at Nikki's place and then decided to go home when she was sobered up. And so with this Isis girl, remember Egypt and Isis. Now Egypt, she's been missing in action. And it come to find out that Egypt was not sleeping with Tammy's husband, Tim. That in fact, Egypt was seeing somebody on the side. And it come to find out. Now, remember I told you Isis was with this guy named Rashad before he got locked up. But Rashad, when he came out of jail, he tried to pursue Isis, but Isis was in a relationship with Tony, this guy that she really loved. Remember, she was with Tony for 5 years and she thought that they was going to get married and everything like that because he was leading her to believe that. But Rashad comes back out of jail and he's a different person. Like he has grown up, he has matured, and now he's ready to be everything that she always wanted him to be. He wanted to marry her, but she turned him down. She said, look, I'm seeing someone. I love him. He loves me and we're going to get married. And he kept pursuing her because he did love her, but she kept turning him down. And it got so bad to where Tony would come over and see Rashad, and then they got to fighting and arguing. And then basically the only reason why Tony presented a ring to Isis is because he felt threatened by Rashad. He didn't want anybody else to have Isis, and the only reason why he proposed to her is to rub it up in Rashad's face. Now Rashad was going to ask Isis to marry him as well, and a fight broke out. He got beat up and Rashad asked her, he was like, will you marry me? Isis, I love you. I know you said you're with this dude, but I love you. Will you marry me? I'm ready to be everything that you want me to be. And she told him no. And she said, I'm going to marry Tony. And so Egypt went to Rashad's side and helped him, fix himself up and helped him back to his crib. So you know what's going to happen, right? Rashad was really distraught. He was hurt by that. And Egypt and Rashad ended up messing around. And they been inseparable ever since. They started becoming an item, like serious about each other. And which is kind of crazy. Like, I'm not finna, even though that was years ago, I'm not gonna mess with my twin sister's man. Like, out of all the men in the world, you gonna mess with him. But anyways, they're an item. But Isis think that her and Tony is going to go on into their happily ever after. But after Tony proposed to Isis, he was dragging his feet about when they were going to get married. He was kind of going back to his old ways. And then she said, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. So they booked a flight to Las Vegas. And while they're out there, she said, you know, we're going to get married and different things like that. Why not? Let's just do it. And he didn't take her seriously. So he was with it too. He was like, yeah, why not? Yeah, we can go out there. We can get married, blase, blase. And so they go out there. They have an amazing time having all this great sex or whatever. And then the next morning, she was like, go ahead and get up. We're going to go get married. And he was dragging his feet. He was like, oh my gosh, he was trying to come up with every excuse not to go up there to the chapel to go get married in Vegas. And so they go all the way to the chapel and they wanted to get married. And then when it comes time for them to give identification, he tries to say, well, I don't have my wallet. And she was like, yes, you do. Your wallet's right here. I saw you put it in your pocket up here. And she took it out and she gives the wallet to him, the person who needed the wallet, his identification. And it was then when he said, you know what? I can't marry you. And she was like, why can't you marry me, Tony? He was like, I can't. The reason why I can't marry you is because I'm already married. I was like, are you kidding me? This dude is already married? Are you kidding me? Here she is, then wasted 5 years of her time with this man who was already claimed. She was livid. She was so pissed off, so hurt, so confused, bewildered. She could not believe that this man had lied to her straight for 5 years. They get on the plane. Of course, after that, he's trying to explain that he loves her and he didn't mean to hurt her and he just got caught up and, you know, all that crap that men say. So they get back. She was like, lose my number. Don't talk to me no more. Don't call me no more. Don't come by, whatever, whatever. And she just began to get into this depression. Really sad, really hurt. Didn't get out of bed for 3 days at a time. Didn't shower and do all this and that. I mean, she's just going in and out. 1 minute she's up, 1 minute she's down. And so, of course, he keep trying to call her phone. Tony keeps trying to call her phone, apologizing. And then one night he just comes over unannounced. And of course, she was like, what do you want? And why are you here? And this and that. And then he began. Now, Tony can screw very well. And he knew what buttons to push. And, you know, he comes inside and she's trying to protest, trying to play hardball with him, saying, you hurt me and all this and that. You was married. Why are you here? Just hurry up and leave. And he just began to break her down and break her down and break her down until they had sex. Okay. And she was thinking in her mind, okay, he came here. He had sex with me. It was the best sex they ever had. And she was like, okay, well, he must gonna tell me when we wake up in the morning that he's going to leave his wife and be with me. So when they woke up the next morning, she, after having that amazing night, she was like, you want some breakfast, baby? Because we need to talk over breakfast. Like, what are we going to do? And he was like, what do you mean? What am I going to do? She was like, well, aren't you going to leave your wife? And he was like, he just laughed in her face. And she was like, what's funny? And he was like, you're funny. He was like, what do you think this was? And she was like, what do you mean? What do you think this was? You said you loved me. You came by here. So obviously you're going to be with me. You're going to leave your wife and be with me. He just laughed. He was like, no. And she was getting angry, but she tried to make sure she was hearing right. And so she tried to remain strong, and she was like, so basically, you just want to come over here and screw me whenever you want? And he was like, yeah, basically, I want to keep doing what we've been doing and just keep it at that. Why ruin a good thing when we got this good thing going? We already know what time it is. I'm not leaving my wife. I got kids. I love them. I'm not going to do that. But we can keep screwing each other. And she was like, okay, baby, that sounds good with me. And I was just like, why is she being so nice? And so when she was going in the kitchen, she grabbed a knife and she had it behind her back and she was smiling at him. She was like, I got something for you. He was like, what you got for me? What you got for me? Come bring it to me. And she pulled out that knife. When he saw that knife, he hurried up and got out that bed. Well, she put it up to his neck and he tried to get up out that bed, and it just so happened she slipped, but he was able to get up out of there. And she can't believe that he had pushed her to that point, that she was actually just trying to stab and kill this man. So she's just crying and just feeling so bad. So she's angry. Now she's ready to get revenge. She goes up there and find out who his wife is, follows her in the grocery store, try to tell her everything that her husband's been doing. And that actually was her first initial run-in with the wife. And that is what prompted Tony to come over to Egypt's house, is because he was mad that she told his wife what they were doing. And so that's why he was there in the first place at her place. And that's what broke her down. And she became vulnerable and gave him some, because it had been a while since they were together. And so now she wants to turn it up a notch. She really wants to hurt him, because before she just verbally told her who her husband was and what he was doing. But now she says, okay, I'm going to turn it up a notch. She actually found out where the wife worked. She gathered all her facts and her information and her pictures and proof of what her husband's been doing. Now she was going to be able to see it physically. And this time when she approached the wife, of course, the wife recognized her from the grocery store. But this time, she was a little mad, but not too mad. And the wife was like, what do you want? And she was like, yeah, I just want to prove to you what your husband's been doing. And she had the envelope. She gave it to her. And, when the wife opened up the envelope and she was going through all of the intimate details of her husband up in these pictures, when they went to Las Vegas, when they would have their sexcapades, and intimate details in these photos, sexual poses and sexual acts. And she saw the hurt and the pain in his wife's eyes. She immediately felt bad. It was never her intention to hurt the wife. She wanted to hurt that rat, Tony. But when she saw the pain that was in his wife's eyes, she felt in that moment like really bad, and that it wasn't really worth going through all this trouble to hurt her, because after all, she didn't know nor was aware of what a low down dirty dog she was married to. And it's not her fault that she wasn't aware of everything. But then the wife kind of gained a little strength and gathered herself after looking at the photos, and she wanted to talk with Isis. So they go to Isis' car and they begin talking, and she began to tell his wife everything from the beginning, how he never alluded to the fact that he was married, and it was easy for him to kind of conceal his marriage because she never would let him spend the night and different things like that, and how they've been together for 5 years, and how he totally just hid everything from her. And it was only when they went to Las Vegas to try to get married and everything like that is when she discovered that he actually was married. And the wife she wasn't too mad at her anymore. She was mad at him because he lied. He was the one that was being deceptive. And this woman didn't really know that he was already married. So she said, call him. And Isis was like, huh? She was like, call him. And so she didn't know what she was supposed to say. But she calls him. And of course, he answered. And he was like, what do you want? Because, mind you, this woman then pulled out a knife on him. So that's why he's like, what do you want? And she was like, I just want to know everything is cool like that. I'm sorry for how, I acted or reacted the last time. And I was just wondering if we could just, pick up where we left off. And I'm agreeing to go ahead and just have sex, meet up and we can have great sex. I'm down with that if you still are. And this rat, decides that, oh, now he wants to comply and he wants to be nice to her. And this fool is willing to have sex with her again, even after this woman, even after she pulled a knife out on him. Men will do anything for the cookie. I just cannot believe this. And so that's when the wife grabbed her phone and said, I want you out of my house. Don't ever come to my house again. Don't ever come around the girls or me. And we're done. I don't want to ever hear from you again. We're done. We're getting a divorce. And she hung up. And that was it. The wife got out the car, said thank you for everything. And she just walked away with such dignity and pride. And that made Isis feel bad about how she took the news of finding out that she was the woman on the side and how horrible and miserable she was acting. And here the wife is, a whole wife, walking away with dignity and walking away with strength, just cried for a second and was able to pick up her pieces and keep it moving. And that made her feel even worse. Like, I'm just a girlfriend. I only been with him 5 years. And I was just breaking down in this funk and this deep depression, really hurt by this man. It just made her feel really low. And so after that, she didn't feel too good. And she just started feeling like a low life, started feeling like she was nothing and good for nothing. She just began to look over her life and couldn't figure out why no man ever wanted her, like why no relationships ever worked out, why everything never ended with a happy ending with her. She just couldn't figure it out. And so she said, I just need to sleep. I need everything to be over with. I don't really want to live anymore. I'm unlovable. I don't understand why or whatever. So she started taking some pills. She's this depressed. She started taking some pills because she feels like I'll never get my happy ending and I'll never be with anyone. And then, like, after she took those pills, she called her sister Egypt. Or no, she called Rashad. I'm sorry. And of course, Rashad answers. He was like, what's up? And she said, I just want you to know that I'm really happy for you in Egypt. I just want you to know that. And he was like, okay. Well, I'm glad that you're happy. Are you sure? And she was like, yeah. He said, well, then what's up? Because I don't know if we really should be talking. And she said, I just want you to answer one thing for me. And he was like, okay, what? She was like, I know that was a long time ago when you and I were together, but when we were together before you went to jail, how come you never married me? And I really want to know the truth. And he said, are you sure you want to know the truth? And then after that, you won't have any more questions? And she was like, yeah. He said, well, at that time, I didn't want to be with you because you seemed desperate and too clingy. And she was like, wow. That was just news for her. It made her feel even worse. But that's what she wanted to know. And so she was like, well, I do appreciate you telling me that? And then, of course, her sister Egypt was in the background. And I think she took the phone and she was like, Isis, are you okay? And she was like, no. She said, I'm really not okay. I'm tired of everything. I'm unlovable. What kind of woman am I? I did have a man that after he got out of jail wanted to marry me, but finding out he didn't want to marry me at one point in time is because I was desperate and clingy, and I lose the man that did want to marry me for another man who was already married, and then he goes off with my sister. And of course Egypt was like, if you really have a problem with it, just let me know and I'll walk away and I'll leave him alone, because nothing is worth our relationship being compromised, excuse me. And she was like, no, it's not that. I'm just tired of everything. And the pills was starting to kick in. Like, she was growing tired and more tired and tired. And she was like, I just want you to know that I always love you. And then, of course, Egypt was getting scared because she was like, are you okay? You're not really talking too good. Are you okay? And she was like, yeah, I will be in a minute. I just need to go to sleep forever. I don't want to wake up. And of course, Egypt knew that something was not right. And of course, next thing, Isis knows she's in the hospital. They had to pump her stomach. And luckily, she was on the phone with them when she was about to just really go off into la la land, sleep and not live again. But when she came to, of course, her sister and Rashad were there. Egypt and Rashad were there. And she kind of felt some type of way, like, how is he going to be here? At one point, he was my man. Now he's my sister's man. I just can't believe this. But that's not really why she's angry. She's just angry because her sister was like, are you sure? I mean, because if you have a problem with me dating him, I'll leave him alone. And Isis knew that she was sincere, but she said, me and Tony were together me and Rashad were together a long time ago. And it's not because of that. It's just that I'm hurt that a married man did this to me, and he played me all those years, and he led me to believe that we had something that we really didn't. That's what really hurt me, and that's what drove me to take those pills or whatever. But of course, she was like, I really want to be left alone, but Egypt is not trying to hear any of that. She needs to look out for her sister. So they're just there for her in the hospital. But in her mind and in her heart, she said, yeah, I decide that I'm going to live my life, but I'm not done with causing chaos and havoc in Tony's life. So she's willing to live to make his life miserable because she's not done with torturing him. And that's how that story ends. And with Nikki, of course, she found out that, the guy she was seeing, Keith, was a guy, but it's a girl. And like I said, when Keith came over that night before the blow up, he handed her an envelope. And when Coco and her were together drinking, talking about their life, Coco encouraged her to read the letter. And so Nikki went ahead and read the letter, and basically the letter was an explanation of everything and telling her the truth about who she really was, that her real name was Karen, and that she always felt like she was in the wrong body, and she always felt like a guy, and how, like, when she did try to tell people the truth, they pushed her away, and how she was afraid of losing her. It was just a long, sad story in the note, and she began to feel bad and sympathetic towards her. So of course, that prompted her to go see Keith's Aunt Gwen at a restaurant. And her Aunt Gwen can tell when Nikki came by that Nikki really still cared a great deal about Keith. And she was like, if you really care about him, and you want to be with him just to, go for it. But Keith has been through a lot. He had a lot of rejection and different things like that. So just be careful. And she was just there to listen to Nikki kind of like vent about how she felt about the whole ordeal. And she was just supporting Nikki in any way that she could as far as being a listening ear. So anyway, she hands Nikki Keith's address. And of course, when she got the address, she went over to Keith's house. And of course, Keith was surprised to see her there. And when she went in, she just basically cut right to the chase. She was just asking Keith, why did you lie to me? Especially when you knew I was in a relationship with a woman already. And Keith was basically just telling her, I thought that you wouldn't accept me. I thought you wouldn't like me, even though I know you were in a relationship with a woman. But it's happened to me before. I just didn't think you would accept me for who I was. And basically, how, because after that incident happened, she wasn't coming to work. She was calling out and stuff like that. And when she visited Aunt Gwen as well, Aunt Gwen was telling her that she had that job because she was saving up for the sex operation to be totally, changed into a man. And so that really hurt Nikki as well. And she asked Keith, she was like, you're missing work and I know you really need that job. And she was like, yeah, but it was just hard going there and, just facing the awkward situation between us or whatever. And she was like, well, your Aunt Gwen told me about what you had plans to do with the money. And she was like, yeah, I was trying to save up for, the operation and everything like that. And she was like, well, I don't want you to lose your job. And so, and they just was talking or whatever. And, Nikki basically just wanted to, have some closure, but it come to find out, like, when the more that they was talking, she still had the same feelings. And she realized in that moment that she still loved her, even though it was a her. She still loved her for who she was. And basically, they just started over. And this time she just said, hi, my name is Karen. And Nikki said, hi, my name is Nikki. And so in that moment that she knew that she wanted to continue what they had together. And that's the way that ended. So she's back to a girl who sees herself as a guy. So, I mean, that's that situation. And then with Tammy and Tim, like I said, instead of Tammy taking some time to really think about her relationship, she kept going back to the Latin guy and sleeping with him. And then, her mother, because she was staying with her mother. When she got kicked out of the house, she had to stay with her mother. And her mother really didn't know what was going on, but she knew something wasn't right when it had been a whole month. She hadn't seen her kids. She hadn't seen her husband. And her mother said, I'm not trying to get in your business, but whatever is going on, you're going to have to go work it out. It's been a month since you've seen your kids. And then that's when Tammy broke down and told her mother everything, that it was her. She messed up. She thought that she was doing something good for the marriage, and it ended up causing more problems and all of that stuff there. And she was like, my husband don't want anything to do with me, because she did try, but he didn't want to answer her phone calls, her texts, none of that. So I guess her way of coping with it was just going back into the arms of the problem with the Latin guy. So after that talk, she had to just really, it made her really think and pick up her things from her mother's place, because she had been there for a month, and go back home. And so, of course, Tim let her back in the house. And of course, he was like, you're going to have to stay in the guest house. Well, actually, the mother called Tim to come over to her house, and they sit down and talk. And when they sit down and talk, she was just crying, saying that she's really sorry and different things like that. He still was kind of mad at her. He said, you can come home, but you're going to have to stay in the guest house. And she was just glad that he even let her back in the house. So she's back in the house, and of course, she's coming in, being the domestic wife, cooking for the kids, glad to be around her kids, cooking his favorite dinners, making sure she's looking the part, looking very sexy and good, but he's not biting one bit. She's trying really hard. And so, she's starting to get that itch because, it's been a while since she had sex or whatever. But she decides that she wanted to see the Latin guy to pretty much explain to him that it's over, just to have closure. So she meets up with him, and of course when she sees him, he's looking like he had, he's been going down through there or whatever. And he was like, "Oh, I've been missing you," or whatever. "You miss me?" And she was like, "I didn't come here for that." And she was basically telling him, "I love my wife and I can't, oh, I'm sorry. I love my husband and I'm his wife and I can't continue doing that. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I care about my family." And she was like, "Well, don't you care about your family?" He was like, "I have nothing to lose. My wife left me. I lost my job. And you think I'm finna let you go?" And she was like, "Look, stop, your wife, if you try to get back with her, maybe she will try to make the marriage work, but we can't do this anymore." And he was trying to fill all up her legs, and she was getting a little weak a little bit. But I was so proud of her that she remained strong, and how her Latin lover was like, "You go, okay, you go on back to your boring sex life, but you're going to eventually miss me going down on you and doing this and that. And I know that's why you're here with me, because he won't do the things that you like and all this and that." But she was strong. She was able to resist him. And I'm glad she broke it off with him. And she went home. She's still trying to sleep with him, but he's not trying to hear it. And then one night, she tries again because she's really, really about to break at this point, because she hasn't had any in a long time. So she tried to be intimate with him, and this prompted them to have a conversation. And he just said, "I want a divorce. Here's the papers. I want a divorce. I don't want to be with you anymore." And that's when she broke down and cried. And she really began to pour her heart out, because for the longest, like, whenever they would have to talk about their issues with what happened, she always would throw up in his face of, him messing up. Or no, she will always throw up in his face that he's the one that basically let her sleep in the bed with another man, instead of taking accountability for her actions and her part playing into their marriage going downhill. And this time she began to pour her heart out and say, "You know what? I love you. I love cooking for you. I love being your wife. I love you being my husband. I love coming home to you. I love the way you smell. I love the way you sleep." Just pouring her heart out. And she said, "I know that I thought I was doing our marriage justice or service by bringing in, a friend, having a threesome, and with me even sleeping with that guy. It just was a bad idea." She began to take ownership and accountability for the part that she played in this whole mess. And she was like, "I love you. I don't love any other man." And he was like, "How am I going to know that you're going to mess up again?" She said, "Because I love you. I can't imagine myself with anybody else. I don't want anybody else. Don't need anybody else. You're the only man I love. And I realize that I messed up and I will never do this again." And so she's just pouring her little heart out. And she just thought that he wasn't going to give in. And she started walking towards the door. But before she can go out, he said, "Come here." And she walks up to him. She didn't know what he was going to say. And he was like, "Well, did you mean all of that?" And she was like, "Yeah, I meant every word." And he was like, "Well, I love you and we can make it work out. I don't want to get a divorce." So I was so glad that they were able to work through this. This is the better for worse part of the marriage. And they was able to reconcile and try again. Because normally, like when the woman messes up, the man don't want nothing to do with her ever again. He just want her out. And it was nice to see how the husband was forgiving the wife. So that worked out. Let's see. So we got ISIS out of the way. Egypt, of course, is out of the way. Okay, Coco. Now, what ended up happening? Of course, Coco found out that Mac was a porno star, and she kept avoiding him because she was hurt. He kept calling, and she started to get tired of Jackson, even though she was up in that nice luxury, um, what was it, a penthouse or a condo or loft or whatever. It just got old. It was just very empty. It meant nothing to her anymore. It couldn't take the place of Mac. You know, all of the designer things, material things, just the money and all of that, that grew old. And then she wasn't satisfied with him. She wasn't satisfied with Jackson because Jackson can't really screw. He don't know what he's doing. So all the time that she was away from Mac just kept calling and kept calling and kept calling, leaving messages, kept calling. And this was the first that any man was that persistent. Although she did have suitors in the past that were persistent, but they would give up like a week and then just totally be disinterested. But he kept going. And so finally, she broke down and decided that they could talk. He comes by there, and she didn't care if Jackson found out if, she had company over there or not. She just didn't care. So Mac came by and they get to talking about it. And he was like, I know I should have told you, but this is the first time I actually fell in love with a woman. I didn't know how to. I'm sorry. And she was like, how are you going to sit there and keep that from me? You don't keep you being a porno star from me. He was like, well, basically, it's no different from what you're doing. You have sex with men for money. It's the same thing. And she was like, well, I've told you, which she did tell him from the gate, that she's been with a lot of men. So she didn't really hide that. She said, that's the difference. I didn't hide mine. You hid yours from me. And he was like, I'm sorry, I should not have done that. But me and you are no different. We both like money and we both like sex. So that's what we do. And she got to thinking about that and she was like, that is true. And so she forgave him now that she thought about it, because here she was up in this loft using Jackson, for money in exchange for sex. So she was like, something sparked in her brain. And she was like, you know what? I think me and you can work it out. Because he was like, I'll quit, doing porn for a living. I'll quit doing that. I'd rather just give that up and be with you. I choose love. And she said, well, what if you can choose both? And he was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, well, I mean, you're a freak. I'm a freak. I like sex. You like sex. Why don't, we do our own thing? We make movies with just you and me and make money. And he said, well, that does sound like a plan, because I did plan on, branching off and making my own movies. So that would be great. So these two fools are perfect for each other. They're going to have their own little porno business and have love. So they're working together, because when she found out how much he was getting each time that he came in these porno videos, which was like $5,000 every time he came, she was like, dang, that's some good money. And then of course he was saying how women makes more money. Her wheels started turning and she was like, man, I can just have the man I love and we just make this a career. So that is the way the book ended, with all of these characters. I greatly enjoyed this book, and I hope you guys enjoyed this review. And I'm going to be doing reading two more books out of this series. So we'll see what they talk about next, or Carl Weber talks about next in the next book. So you guys be easy until the next time. Ciao. Bye bye.